Call this meeting to order. Welcome to meeting number 60 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on the Status of Women. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the House Order of June 23, 2022. Members are attending in person in the room and remotely using the Zoom application. I would like to make a few comments for the benefit of the witnesses and members. Please wait until I recognize you by name before speaking. For those participating by video conference, and I'm looking to see what faces I see there, it looks like we've got no amateurs are on here, so I think, Ms. Lamb, we're going to have to make sure we know what's going on there. So nice to see you, Ms. Lamb, online. But if you're in the room, make sure there's interpretation here and you have your headpiece, so both English, French, and the floor is available. And on Zoom, you have your choice of English, French, or the interpretation there as well, or on the floor as well. If you wish to speak, please just raise your hand, and on Zoom, please use the raise hand function. In accordance with the committee's routine motion concerning connection tests for witnesses, I'm informing the committee that all witnesses appearing virtually have completed the required tests. Pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motion adopted on Tuesday, February 1st, 2022, the committee will resume its study of human trafficking on women, girls, and gender-diverse people. Before we welcome our witnesses, I would like to provide this trigger warning, especially I know we have some different people in the room today, so you guys are really going to find out what we really do here. So all the hard stuff's done here in this room. We'll be discussing experiences related to abuse. This will be triggering to viewers, members, or staff with similar experiences. If you feel distressed or if you need help, please advise the clerk or just alert us what's going on. Now, I would really like to welcome our panelists for today. I'll take off my glasses so I can do this. From the Butterfly Asian Migrant Sex Worker Support Network, we have Hélène Lam, who is online there. You'll see Hélène. From the Sex Workers of Winnipeg Action Coalition, we welcome to Kate Sinclair and Stella Lemay de Memi, Sandra Wesley, who is the Executive Director. So I would like to welcome you by giving you each 5 minutes to start, and I will be passing the first 5 minutes over to Hélène online. Hélène, you have the floor for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Hélène Lam. So I am the Executive Director of Butterfly, which is an Asian and Migrant Sex Worker Support Network. We are the community lead organization which organize and provide support for over 5,000 Asian and migrant sex workers across Canada. I have been working on human rights and anti-trafficking issues for over 20 years internationally and 10 years in Canada. Today, we would like to share the voice of Asian and migrant sex workers and let you know how the current anti-trafficking policy do not help traffic victims, but victimize, traumatize sex worker, migrant, racialized, and gender diverse people. I would like to give you some example of the experience of the worker. A member of Butterfly has been living in Canada for 15 years. She came as a caregiver, but she was not able to get her PR because her abusive boss is rejected to do immigration paper with her. She became undocumented after her spouse sponsorship being rejected. And she started working in sex industry. One day, few police officers broke her door, and in her apartment, she was handcuffed, forced her to stand at the corner of the wall. She was treated like a murderer. She was being asked if you are controlled or if anyone helped you. Confusingly, police told her that they came to protect her. She was asked if she was safe. She told the police, I was safe before you came. Then police called CBSA and arrest her. Police seized her phones, $10,000, and it is all the money she earned and saved in Canada. Working in sex industry is not only because she has poverty, but it is also the way she resists fights against poverty. During the interview by the law enforcement, she told them about her experience of being robbed, assaulted, and almost being killed. However, they did not care. Her friend was also arrested because they were suspected working together as organized crime. Both of them were deported. This is only one of the story what happened to Butterfly's member. Over 300 members of Butterfly have been reported experience harassment charges, arrest, imprisonment, and deportation. Even migrants have work permit. They will lose their immigration status when they work in sex industry. Many workers and their family are framed as traffickers and being arrested when they help other workers to communicate or work safely. Hundreds of Asian massage parlors were being shut down because of the anti-trafficking campaign. The Asian women lost their work, ways of living, and dignity. This is obvious not the solution of the problem. The rescue approach has been adopted by Canada and many countries, but this is not working. The current system which is aiming at ending sex worker, is not working. It pushed sex work, particularly migrant racialized sex worker, work underground, promote discrimination and hate against sex worker, increase their vulnerability to violence and exploitation, and they are not able to seek help. Instead of protection, this is harming the people. More of the same is not useful. That's why we need new way to address the issue. That's why we are here today. For many marginalized Black, Indigenous, migrant sex workers, police are the major source of violence, pipeline to prison and deportation. Instead, keep asking people to trust police. We should develop the alternative. The people can access support, help from the people they trust. The rights not rescue approach must be adopted to respect the agency of people, empower people to protect themselves and their community that they can access safety and leave the exploitative situation. Here is the solution. Remove all the law against sex worker and migrant in their life. They can protect themselves without fear and criminalize. Remove the immigration ban for people to work in sex industry. We do not need trafficking-specific funding. Support people of access housing, income, labor rights, and status. They can leave the violent situation. Support community to build a safety measure. Empower. They can support themselves and their community. I want to emphasize the root cause of migrant exploitation is the lack of permanent residency. This is why we continue to fight with many migrants organizations, the regularization of all undocumented people and permanent resident status for all people, all migrant, student, refugee, and family. We are disappointed migrant workers lead organization like Migrant Workers Alliance for Change is still not invited to speak. So Butterfly have done a lot of research and many scholars have done a lot of research about the harm of anti-trafficking. And I'm happy to answer more questions and provide more information how this system is not working and what should be the alternative that make people safe and protect the people experiencing in difficult situations. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I don't know if you timed yourself at home, but somehow you were almost right on the dot. Way to go. I'm now going to pass the floor over to Kate Sinclair. Kate, you have the floor for 5 minutes.
Thank you. My name is Kate Sinclair. I'm currently studying law here in Ottawa, and I'm a member of the Sex Workers of Winnipeg Action Coalition. We're a group of sex workers, activists, allies, and researchers back in my home of Winnipeg, Manitoba on Treaty 1 territory. So we have a clear mission to fight exploitation, not sex workers. We need you to understand that many groups that call themselves anti-trafficking organizations are centered in the goal of eradicating sex work, their words. To people among these groups, sex work is inherently dangerous, and sex workers are making a conscious choice to do something dangerous. So if we experience violence while we work, we chose it, we asked for it, and we even created it. This gets taught to our police, who then use that basis to interact with workers. We can't keep trying to end abuse by criminalizing and surveilling sex workers. Laws and policies often place the blame for trafficking directly on sex workers themselves, creating a simultaneous victim and abuser narrative that is impossible to navigate. It encourages law enforcement to drop in on sex workers with, quote, wellness checks, and empowers raids, arrests, deportation, and other forms of state violence. A story that might help to illustrate this comes from my own life working in queer adult film. I was contacted out of the blue by a sex worker I'd never met. She was trying to double check with me to make sure that she was auditioning with my company, and this was the first that I'd heard of it because I don't hold auditions. Pardon me. As it turns out, someone was using my reputation and status as a filmmaker to lure sex workers to a rural address. He was stealing my name to get free sex, which is abuse. But he knows that the systems that criminalize sex workers and their clients actually support him, and he was right. We realized we couldn't come forward to report this man to police. The worker was rightfully, and from experience, more concerned about being arrested herself, losing her income, and losing her kids. Because laws and attitudes that cast sex workers as both traffickers and trafficked, victim and abuser. We had his address, and we could not do anything. So we did what we could to keep people in the area safe. We posted warnings online and reached out to local sex worker groups. We tried our best to keep others from accepting his pitch. But keep in mind that policing the internet and physical spaces to eradicate sex work from public view and away from community means that warnings and community initiatives can only go so far. And that has only gotten worse in recent years with anti-trafficking legislation in digital spaces. It's getting harder for us to warn people. If you want to address harm, you need to step back and look at the circumstances that Canada has put in place to put people there. Oppressive immigration system, criminalization of sex work, poverty, access to housing, race to the bottom in worker rights and minimum wages, poor support for those living with disabilities, and police surveillance of marginalized communities. Going forward, think of support, not more criminalization in a system that is already hostile to women, girls, and gender-diverse folks. Not patronizing deportation and incarceration will save you attitudes. This may surprise you, but people aren't excited to go to prison for reporting workplace violence. Sex workers have been supporting our communities while criminalized for a long time. We're often the first to see when something is wrong, but if we get arrested, exposed to further surveillance, or even just written off when we come forward, it's not going to work. Start with decriminalization of sex work, immigration status for migrant sex workers, affordable housing, guaranteed basic livable income so people can make choices about the work that they do, comprehensive and inclusive education systems that don't shame women's sexuality. We have laws around trafficking. We have the laws. If they're not working or being used, we need to analyze why and not make new laws that are just going to uphold the status quo. So I'll just wrap up with another story from an Indigenous sex worker in the prairies, from their words. When I was a youth, I was houseless and participated in survival street sex work. Having been a sex worker is something I've always been open about in my writing, activism, and scholarship. I'm not ashamed because I am describing a common experience for Indigenous prairie youth. Anti-sex work rhetoric is anti-Black, anti-Indigenous, whorephobic, trans-misogynist, and classist, no matter how you try to dress it up in the aesthetics of resistance and decoloniality. To circulate anti-sex work rhetoric is to have Indigenous blood on your hands. The only place I found support to survive was in the streets. The violent force that, quote, pushed me into sex work was Canada and Canadians. So we as SWAC remind you to fight exploitation, not sex workers. Together we can make a safer world for everyone, but not if you're trying to eradicate us. Thank you very much, and I do welcome any questions you might have.
Thank you so much. You guys are really timed out very well today. Unbelievable. And we're going to invite Sandra. Sandra, you've got 5 minutes.
Hi, I'm Sandra Wesley. I'm the Executive Director of Stella L'Ami de Mamie. We're an organization by and for sex workers based in Montreal. While we do advocacy, our primary mandate is to provide services to sex workers. We make on average 5,000 to 8,000 contacts with sex workers all across the sex industry in Montreal, in every possible sphere of the sex industry. We're also accountable to our sex working community, which is large, diverse, and complex. We have a policy at Stella and in most sex workers' rights organizations where we don't tell personal stories. We can identify as sex workers, but we owe it to ourselves, to self-respect, and to our community to not give you our horror stories to be used against us, to not make you cry, to not focus on emotions. And the reason is because, well, for one, those are always used against us, but it's also because we have a thing called a charter that promises us this idea that we're supposed to have rights regardless of public opinion. So we shouldn't have to give you drama in order for you to listen to us, and you shouldn't take our more dry focus on human rights as somehow indicative that we're denying violence or that we're, not giving you what you want to hear. So the first point I want to make is that trafficking as a concept is absolutely useless to address violence against women, violence against sex workers. It is an ideology. For most of the 20th century, the terms that were commonly used were white slavery, in French, traite des blanches, and it's only when that became so obviously racist that the language started to change a little bit. This is entirely about racist notions of racialized men coming after pure, innocent white women, and it hasn't changed since. It's a deliberate strategy of a movement that aims to eradicate the entire sex industry, to use the word trafficking, because in today's day and age, just saying we hate sex workers and we want to eradicate them doesn't work the same way. You don't have to necessarily take my word for it. I invite you to refer to the committee, the Standing Committee on Justice and Human Rights report on trafficking from a few years ago, I believe 2018, maybe 2019. Chapter 2 of that report very clearly lays out that they heard 2 types of witnesses. They heard people who believe that all sex work is trafficking, and they heard from sex workers who had a more nuanced perspective. Obviously, your colleagues at the time chose to ignore sex workers and just take wholesale everything that was told by people who aim to eradicate sex work. It's your job to actually look at the evidence, to reject witnesses that have an ideology that is explicitly stated, and to question what you're hearing. I heard in previous meetings of this committee absolutely outrageous things being said, including the fact that 12-year-olds are somehow common in the sex industry. There is no evidence to support this. If you look at every single sex work location in this country that is rated over and over and over and over, 12-year-old girls are not being found as a common occurrence in the sex industry. That is absolutely false. The average age of entry into sex work is not 14. That is absurd. If you have 4th grade math, you should be able to understand that. So we are tired of constantly having to fight against absolutely absurd things when what we say is not heard. The reality is that there's been a mass hysteria on trafficking for many years in this country. There's been hundreds of millions of dollars poured into it, and the evidence does not support it. It's not because it's so hidden. It's not because the victims are so afraid. We are the victims that you claim to be concerned about, and we are here to tell you that this approach is not working. This ideology does not respond to our needs. There's not two separate groups. We don't have sex workers on one side and victims of trafficking on the other side. And because we don't choose to use that ideological language to identify does not mean that we are not specifically the women that anti-trafficking experts come to talk to you about. Most of us would be identified as victims of trafficking based on the definitions of anti-sex work advocates. Parliament has decided in 2014 through the Protection of Communities and Exploited Persons Act to set as the objective the eradication of sex workers. It is therefore incompatible with any objective to make sure that we are protected, that our human rights are respected, that we have good working conditions. And ultimately, trafficking is about bad working conditions, right? It's about either forced labor or labor conditions so horrible that they meet this definition of trafficking. When, as a group, we do not have access to basic labor standards, when we don't have minimum wage, we don't have any maximum working hours, we don't have sick pay, vacation pay, maternity leave, access to occupational health and safety, when we don't have any of that, it is impossible to even start to talk about what could trafficking possibly look like in such an industry. Trafficking is a concept that is useful when we are talking about workers who have rights and things that go outside of the norm. Focusing on trafficking hides the actual violence that we actually experience. We are telling you that there are serial killers that are murdering us, and that's not interesting. If we don't phrase it as trafficking, no one cares. We're telling you that we are being sexually assaulted, that we are, yes, I see that my time is up, but I will finish talking about the violence that we're experiencing. Thank you. Okay. We are telling you that we are being robbed.
Sandra, with all due respect, I am listening to you. We're all listening to you. But the reason that we do have times is so that all of us can ask these really important questions, so that things that you're saying, like that no one's listening, so that we can actually ask these questions. So although I do support that, as the chair, I will be now moving over to the sides, because we have respect in this, and I will respect you, you respect me, we'll all get along just perfectly. Do you have a few more seconds or minutes, may I ask?
I can finish in 30 seconds if you want.
Finish in 30 seconds, please.
So as I was saying, we have been screaming for years that our employers can rob us in impunity, that our clients can assault us, can threaten us, that our landlords can evict us. We are talking about absolutely horrific working conditions, and unless we're willing to phrase it as trafficking and to agree that the solution is for us to lose our employment, to do something else with our life, no one actually cares. So the solution, if your concern is violence against sex workers, then don't call it trafficking. Say you're concerned about violence against sex workers, and then you will come to the conclusion that decriminalization is the absolute essential first step that we need.
Sandra, thank you so much. Now we're going to go to our round of questioning. So each round, we'll start each round. Each party has an opportunity. For the first 6 minutes, we'll start from Michelle Frary. Michelle, you have the floor for 6 minutes.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair, and I really want to thank our witnesses for being here at the Status of Women Committee as we talk about and undertake a study on human trafficking. Been interesting, and thank you very much for each of your testimonies. If I could start with Ms. Lamb. Ms. Lamb, I think there's still a lot of confusion and perhaps out of good intention to try to protect women, but there's still a lot of confusion between sex work and sex trafficking. And so I guess what I would ask for you is to help educate people maybe who are watching at home what the difference is, and how do we ensure that our loved ones, family and friends, are protected if there is a choice involved in this? What is the difference?
I think just like Sandra described, the term human trafficking, sex trafficking is useless and confusing because we hear many anti-sex work organizations, they just call any sex work activity as human trafficking, right? So that if we can take out this ideology about sex work is bad, about people should not do sex workers, so then we can go to like other kind of work, right? People may have different life conditions, they need to do sex work, or like people have life conditions, so they may want to be a chef, in the kitchen. So, and also when you ask the caregiver whether they want to fly away from their family to take care of the children of the other, they may not tell you, they will not tell you that is not the ideal work, but doesn't mean we need to criminalize this kind of work, right? So, and I think that why this committee keep having so much trouble is because the definition of human trafficking so often is being used conflate sex work. And so that the purpose of using this term is eradicate sex worker and make people think sex worker is evil, sex work.
Thank you, and sorry if I interrupt you. It's just time, so we only have certain time. That's why we're.
Thank you.
So thank you. So just to clarify, you don't. I guess I'm confused. So are you saying that there isn't a difference between sex trafficking and sex work, or you don't want to use that terminology?
I think we don't need to waste so much energy and time to keep identify who is trafficking, who is not, right? What is human trafficking? We hear the story, there is like maybe related to the domestic violence, the people may being many of like our community as anyone like work for other sex worker to take money is being seen as human trafficking. Okay. So that's why if we take away the human trafficking, we focus on how the women and people can get the power that they can have the agency to define themselves.
Ms. Lam, if I may, I'm just trying to be succinct here. So I think what we were studying is there is a significant difference between someone who chooses, like I think Pornhub, the documentary, I don't know if you've watched it, Money Shot, I think it did a really great job. I don't know if you agree or disagree with that, but I thought it did a really good job of creating. We're talking about two very, very different things, and I don't think around this table anyone has any judgment, or anyone who chooses to have a healthy choice in escorting or sex work or whatever you want to call that. I think what we're trying to dissect here is how do we tell the public, because if you have a business opening up or you have an escort business opening up, that is sex work, as opposed to a child who is online and has been lured and has, a pimp who's a guerrilla pimp or a romance pimp who is manipulating her and using her and taking control of her life. I think we're trying to dissect the difference. We want to support choice for women who are in a position to do that. I think it's a little bit confusing for the committee of what you're saying. You're saying there's no such thing as human trafficking.
I just say that, like, for example, when sex work is still criminalized, when sex work is being seen as human trafficking, sex work is being seen as exploitation, we cannot differentiate the violence. And we know
very well because I went out on a ride along with. Sorry, Ms.
I'm just going to have to interrupt for a second.
Are we out of time?
No, we're not out of time.
Okay.
Just to make sure. So because we're on, and I know sometimes it's very difficult virtually. So just. The questioners do have the time. We try to do it as equally as possible, but when the person who is asking the questions, interrupts, let's just try to get back on stat. Thanks so much.
So I want to point out, because I went out on a ride along with one of our human trafficking divisions in my riding of Peterborough Kawartha, and the police officers were very in tune with who was sort of escorts or sex work, and they really left them alone, and they had a great relationship with them. They did all they could. They knew that they weren't part of a group of vulnerable women who were being used. There was women who were choosing to do this lifestyle. They were independent. They were entrepreneurs, for lack of a better term. They weren't being controlled by anyone. And so I definitely saw that within the police that I deal with, as well as when we went to Halifax. So I don't think I don't know of any police officers that are arresting legitimate entrepreneurs. So again, I'm not understanding what you're saying.
Yeah, because I think the current legal system assume all the third party, for example, helping other sex workers to do advertisement, helping other people to find a workplace, that is all is become illegal. They are often being framed as human trafficker in the narrative, in the story, also in the law. So that's it. That's why I keep saying that we are not able to see the agency of the people. We do not able to see the actual situation of people when we call sex work as human trafficking, when we see sex work is exploitative. So that's why we see so many police keep harassing the sex worker place. So for example,
thanks so much, Hélène. What we're going to do is we're going to pass it over to Emanuela Labroblos, who is also online. So we just watch this. If things are both going green, let's just make sure that we both get equal opportunity to speak. So Emanuela, you've got 6 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'd like to begin by thanking all of our witnesses for being here to shine some light on this study. I would like to first give the opportunity to Sandra to continue what she was saying in her opening remarks. I know that we are on a time limit, and I understand Madam Chair's decision, but I know you were beginning to speak about the abuse that sex workers do encounter. So if you can just, continue with that, and then I'll go ahead and ask my questions.
Thank you very much. So the point I was trying to make earlier is that while we've talked, and I'm sure a lot of other witnesses have told you about this conflation of sex work and trafficking, there's also a conflation of all kinds of violence against sex workers and trafficking. Trafficking should have a very narrow definition that involves forced labor and very specific things. And what is happening is that now any kind of violence against sex workers, any kind of bad working condition now gets put under this umbrella of trafficking. So we're not saying that violence doesn't exist. Actually, we are desperate for help to end that violence. And we know in every other industry, when we have bad working conditions, we unionize. We see outside here in Ottawa, the government workers that are unionized and that are fighting for their rights. We should have the same right as sex workers. If we don't have those basic rights as workers, then it just doesn't make any sense to start talking about when we might be trafficked or not trafficked, because we don't even have the legitimacy to work and to create good working conditions for ourselves. So what I'm interested, and I think a lot of people on this committee are interested in, is figuring out how we avoid more serial killers going after sex workers, how we avoid people, exploiters and abusers, hearing the message that government is sending them, that is to say, sex workers are a good victim for you because you will not be caught. You can be violent against sex workers because we also want to eradicate them. And if you want to exploit someone's labor, you better do it in the sex industry because they don't have rights there and they will be more afraid of police than they are afraid of you. So it's really important to stop conflating sex work and trafficking. It's also very important to stop conflating violence against sex workers and violence against women in general and trafficking.
Okay, thank you very much for clarifying that. Now, I heard you in the last couple of minutes say that trafficking should include forced labor in its definition, of course. I think that's what I believed trafficking was before coming into the study. And so if we were to change the definition and create legislation or remove or fix the legislation that currently exists around trafficking, what are some specific recommendations that you would make in terms of the actual definition that you would use? And then we'll get into the rights of sex workers in my next question.
So the first thing obviously would be to repeal immigration provisions that cause migrant sex workers, regardless of their type of work, to be deported. That's the very first and immediate thing that can be done. And then the other thing is really more than changing trafficking laws, it's removing sex work laws that are almost word for word the same laws and that already position all sex work as de facto trafficking. So that's what we need first so we can actually have an intelligent conversation about trafficking. And then the other thing thing is to stop trying to pass all these new bills that try to, make it so that you don't actually need a victim, that the victim can be screaming in court. And there are cases like this that you can go read if you read decisions on trafficking cases where the victim is crying and screaming in court, I'm not trafficked, leave me alone, I don't want to be here. Yet she's still forced to testify for days and days and days and in very, very traumatic conditions. So we need to give up this idea that we're so traumatized that we need to be forced to be identified as a victim. So that's really the first step. And once we have a coherent definition of sex work as work, then I think the concept of trafficking becomes much more evident. And then finally, we need to stop giving a different standard to sex workers. Most workers work because we live under capitalism and you need to make money to pay your bills. No one's going into fast food restaurants asking employees if they really feel empowered, if it's a choice, if they're forced to go to work today. We assume that people have to work. We even have unemployment that says you have to take any decent work that you can find, no questions asked. So we need to have the same standard for sex workers. We're not trafficked just because we hate our job. We can hate our job and still decide to go do it because that's how we pay our bills. And there's a lot more nuance to that. So bringing it to the same rational conversation as other forms of work is really where where solutions start to emerge and where a conversation on trafficking. And final little point, human trafficking is not the same thing as sex trafficking. Human trafficking is like this concept of selling humans. Sex trafficking is selling sex, just like drug trafficking is selling drugs, gun trafficking is selling guns. And conflating those two terms and mixing it is one of the ways by which people conflate sex work and trafficking and create other language that is new and very concerning.
45 seconds left, Emanuela.
Well, thank you guys. Thank you very much, Sandra.
Oh, you have 45 seconds left.
Oh, I thought you said 5.
No, 30. Okay, 45
Okay,
seconds.
so-
Go for it.
Okay, thank you. So a follow-up question that I have, Sandra, is you mentioned earlier that I guess a big part of why we're doing the study is because women who are in sex work are often not treated well by the people who are employing them, for example. And it's because there are no rights because it's not a recognized form of work by the government. So I'm wondering if you have any specific recommendations on what you would, what are some of the basic things that you should be included if ever there were to be a definition of sex work and what would be allowable if that was.
Emanuela, you took 40 seconds to ask the question. I've got about 10 seconds for maybe one, and then we can do some writing on that one as well, but I can't provide it.
It will be sexworklawreform.com. We have 80 pages of law reform recommendations about sex work that go into great detail, and currently we are in a constitutional challenge against the Government of Canada, and all of that is available also to read our arguments and the government's arguments, awesome. Which I encourage you to read and understand the violence of what it is to defend sex work criminalization.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. We're now going to move it over to Louise Chambeau. Louise, you've got 6 minutes.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you to the witnesses. I'll start with Miss Wesley. Stella has been operating for 25 years now, I believe, and the work that you do for sex workers and to protect them is well known. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but when we're talking about human trafficking of women, you said there are no girls who are sex workers, but the International Labor Organization has been examining the matter of victims of human trafficking who are children. 34% of them are children. And when we're talking about trafficking, we're not talking about children who made the choice to work in sex work. And migrant children are very vulnerable to trafficking. And that is a reality. I understand that there's a distinction to make between sex work and human trafficking. However, Is this distinction something that you recognize? Yes, we're not saying that there aren't any violent behaviors that are similar to definitions of human trafficking. There are extreme cases of abuse, for example, but they're marginal and more rare than what the data will show. And it's hard to trust the data because definitions are not clear and it comes from non-trustworthy sources. And if we come back to Canada and minors who offer sexual services and who do it in horrible conditions, what we see in our community, and because we see them, is that often these are members of the LGBTQ community that who were kicked out of their homes, and so they need to offer services in order to find a way to live. They will be very vulnerable to offenders, but they don't have their place in society. They don't have anywhere to live. They don't trust the child protection services and the police. And many of the young girls in that kind of situation leave foster homes or young Indigenous women who end up in the city without support. And the issue for these people is not trading sexual services. Often they say that they want to be safe and they want to survive. And the violence that they face is an issue, but sex work was a solution that wasn't worse than stealing a bike and selling it or asking for money on a street corner. So police repression against sex work puts people at risk, and it gives a lot of space to abusers to act with impunity. So we're not denying that there's violence, and some of that violence is trafficking, and that there are young people who are offering sexual services in bad conditions, but you need to ask them what they need, and it's not police repression. I understand that, but I was saying that there was still trafficking, but I don't understand the seriousness of the issue here in Canada. And some would say that the pandemic also had an impact on the numbers. It increased poverty and other conditions. There are people who will traffic people who are not sex workers, but they will be exploited for different reasons, including for sexual violence. And it's not the person's choice. A person ends up becoming a victim. Answer: it's possible for people to exploit others in the sex industry because the industry is criminalized. It's the same violence dynamics as other types of violence, but it goes even further because the industry is criminalized. I often give the example of a nurse working in a hospital. A violent person takes her checks, but she would be able to turn to her colleagues to say, please help me, I'm in a difficult situation. She'll go to the police and she'll be taken seriously. But in an industry where everyone can be criminalized, well, it gives aggressors the opportunity to find ways to be violent. And that is why it's hard. You cannot separate the violence and the criminalization of the industry.
We're now going to pass it over to Leah Gazan. Leah, you got it for 6 minutes.
Thank you so much, Chair, and I'm sorry for my laughter and cackle. I just thought that was funny. I actually don't know many people who go to a fast food restaurant and say, I just love my job flipping a burger at 2 a.m. But anyway, I apologize for my cackle. But so I just want to start off. I want to go back to Madame Lam, is it? Lamb. Okay. You spoke about needing another alternative to police. And, and I actually have an initiative I'm trying to put forward for murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls, a red dress alert, and I'm saying the oversight needs to be separate from police. And here's why. So we were just in Halifax, and I wasn't shocked, but I think it was broader than I thought. So they talked about customers, right? So in terms of sex work customers, they found in a study of sex work, 50% were law enforcement, 38.9 were professionals such as doctors and lawyers, so part of the judiciary. Landlords, employers, 38.9, that wasn't surprising. Political, spiritual, and cultural leaders, so I'd say political, is part of that, 27.8 in terms of consumers. So, that makes sense to me in terms of you can't have people overseeing your protection, objectively if they're your customer. Is that one of the reasons why?
I think we need to differentiate client. The client is giving money, and many client actually is important support system for sex worker. To differentiate the perpetrator, they pretend to the client to harm the community. What we see, because sex work is criminalized, we see there is a lot of law enforcement, including police by law enforcement officer. They will put themselves as a position of client to take advantage of the sex worker not paying, or threaten them if they don't collaborate, will be arrest them. And so I don't know the study, but this is very clear, the experience that client can be anyone, but if we see all the client as bad client, we cannot differentiate the client. So that's why in the sex worker law reform, we also recommend to decriminalize sex workers so that we can differentiate who are the sex worker, give income, give support to the sex worker, but also how those people are harming sex worker. And then the law enforcement.
Just because I have a limited time, I have a limited time here.
Okay.
So I appreciate that. And that's something certainly I hear in the city of Winnipeg, like threats by people in positions of authority. Either you do this or, or I'll arrest you, or whatever it is, right, by people in power. So, and that brings me to another point, and I wanted to move over to you, Madame Sinclair. So my whole theory is when you make people illegal, like any person, right today we're talking about sex workers, that you place them at risk. I think we've heard lots of examples about how because you're illegal, when something illegal happens, there's nowhere for you to go. Do you agree with that, and can you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, very much. So going to the stories that I spoke about earlier even, there's places where people who aren't experiencing criminalization would be able to seek some kind of help, whereas, in these situations, I tell stories to get my points across for myself. There was an experience of stalking that I experienced because of anti-trafficking laws that make me have to publish my address that I keep my records at, so that's available to the public. So of course, people have shown up trying to find my office and that sort of thing. I've reached out to the police at one point when it got really spooky, and they replied to me months later and said, well, of course, this guy was interested. What did you expect? You work in a dangerous field. And there was no follow-up. There was nothing else. And so it really limits our ability to seek help, as well as with wellness checks. We've had members of SWAC share their stories with us about having police check in. I understand that, in Halifax with ride-alongs, you're being, the red carpet is rolled out for you. But realistically, these wellness checks have ended up with sex workers who have found out via privacy, Information Act kind of requests, that they have had notes of prostitution written on their records. So now they can't go to the States. They can't travel. They have committed no crime, but this is somehow on their record permanently.
So just adding on, and I know that you're from Winnipeg and you're familiar with some of the issues that we're dealing with in Winnipeg. We had a national inquiry into murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls that came out. We know that the child welfare system, and I think we heard an example today from Madame Wesley, is a pipeline to becoming murdered or missing. But they also had very clear calls for justice in the national inquiry related to sex work. One of the things that I've been pushing, and please agree or disagree with me, but, I say there's a very clear difference between child sexual exploitation and that we've normalized child sexual exploitation in this country when we say call an 11-year-old a sex worker.
Miss
They're
Leah?
not. They're a sexually exploited child. Would you agree? And I ran out of time.
Oh, sure, yeah, but what I'll do is we've gone quite a bit over time there. What I'll do is I will add a little bit because what I'll do, hold that in your thoughts. We'll do our next round. We'll come back to Leah, and then we'll be able to ask that because we had gone quite a bit over. So I'll just make sure that time works out. So Dominique, you're back for 5. We're doing the 5, 5, 2.5, 2.5. Go
Merci,
ahead.
Madame la Présidente.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you to the witnesses for being with us today. I'll start with you, Ms. Lam. Thank you for being with us today. You mentioned that police are one of the main sources of the issues that we've studied at this committee. You also stated that we should develop an alternative. What did you mean by that?
Yeah, so for Butterfly, actually over 60% of our members has reported they have experienced different kind of violence from police and law enforcement. So because the police system is being designed to ending sex work, they are designed to police many racialized and migrant people, so that if you give them the mission to help other workers, particularly migrant sex workers, it's not working. So that's why I think in this committee and many, many occasions we hear the people say the victim is too fear to speak, too fear to report, but it's not true that the victim keep telling you police is not someone they trust, police is not someone they want to go to. So that's why
Sorry to interrupt you, but what would be the alternative to police services? What should be implemented?
So in many, many issues, like for example, mental health now have more initiative to provide the community support because sex worker is the best defender of the rights and safety of other sex worker. So when the sex work is not criminalized, the sex worker can protect each other. They can monitor, like what is the safety measure? Is it anyone is taking the power against other sex worker? Is it people working safe? So there is a lot of initiative can provide the resources to the community, particular sex work community.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Lam. A question for Ms. Wesley. Welcome. You talked about labor standards and implementing that for sex workers. How would that help in dealing with human trafficking? Well, decriminalization would allow us to have access to the same standards as other workers. If, for example, we work for a community organization or the government and we're not paid, well, we can send a complaint. There's a process. But if you're in a criminalized type of employment, well, violence can escalate. We need to arm ourselves. We need to be suspicious of everyone around us. So having standards and access to unemployment would allow us to have better data. Do you believe that we would be able to eradicate trafficking or violence? It's difficult to think in extremes like that because violence against women is something that can be found throughout society, but it would make a difference. Just as there are fewer children working in mines through having standards, that's what we would focus on, and there are concrete examples in New Zealand of this. Thank you, Ms. Wesley. Miss Sinclair, thank you for being with us today. Do you speak French? Kate, what would you like to see in our report? What would make a difference? What could we add to a report as parliamentarians? You understand the industry, you're studying law, and you've reflected on this, and you have a greater understanding of the industry. So what would you like to see in our report? I don't know how much time I have, Madam Chair.
To respond.
I would make a big recommendation not to follow other countries that are making sex trafficking or anti-trafficking laws, specifically like the United States has done a digital initiative through 2 pieces of law called SESTA FOSTA, aimed at digital spheres. These have made incredible differences in the lives of sex workers in the negative way. They have taken down access to safe ways to communicate on the internet, which whenever it launched, those services launched in each city, you saw drops in murder of sex workers. And so now that that has been repealed, it's been 5 years, the legislation has been used once to prove trafficking, and it has actually murdered people.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Kate. We're now going to move it over to Anita Vanderbilt. Anita, you've got 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And so I only have 5 minutes, and I have a question for each of you. So I'll ask you to keep your answers short. But I'd like to start with you, Ms. Lamb, particularly on the prohibition on foreign nationals to engage in consensual sex work. This is something that I think many of us didn't even know existed until this study. Could you give us your recommendation about what we do about that? Is it just completely eliminate that from our immigration law?
Yes, remove any immigration law prohibit people work in sex work and related industry, and also do not put the immigration prohibition in people work permit. So this is very important, and so that we just want to you guys to support and eliminate as soon as possible. And the other thing, we know that the generalization, like giving people status, is also very important to protect migrants from exploitation and violence.
Thank you, and thank you for being short. Ms. Wesley, you spoke about, you alluded very quickly to a very long sexworklawreform.com and a constitutional challenge and decriminalization. And could you, in 1 minute, give us the key recommendation? What is it that we need to do as legislators?
Removal of any mention of sex work from the criminal code, so full decriminalization, not legalization, full decrim, and removing the immigration policies. We have a few recommendations for other things like unemployment, not forcing people to go do sex work. That's sort of basic stuff that we will need to think about. And then we have recommendations for provincial realms of law and how that would then happen. And in our constitutional challenge, we need the government to stop defending these laws in court and not force us to go all the way to the Supreme Court, and not send representatives of the federal government to say that identifying 34 murdered sex workers in a period of 4 years is a reasonable number of sex workers to be murdered under this legislation, which is the actual argument that your government is making in court right now.
Okay, thank you very much for that. I think we'll take a look as a committee at some of those other recommendations as well. Thank you. Ms. Sinclair, I first of all, thank you for coming back. I know you were interrupted before. I'm mortified by the story that you told when you first started about a predator and not being able to even get any recourse to report this predator. Other than decriminalization, other than making sure that that sex work, consensual sex work, is legal, are there other things government can do to protect people who are in this industry?
It's tough because decriminalization is so central to the issue. So this is the trouble, is that if we don't do decriminalization, then the other things that we're still going to experience the police enforcing the violence. So we can say, oh, talk to police and get them to, be gentle and understand. But when the reality is, because I know I've heard some folks come to this committee and say that no, it's only clients who are criminalized, but we have lists of folks who have been charged and under trafficking themselves, that sort of thing. So sex workers charged with trafficking themselves. So these are lies that people are advancing because it's in the interest of eradicating sex workers, right? So I think decrim is really where we need to focus. But again, kind of working to make sure that that wellness checks, like, stop. If police know that these people are working in consensually, that sort of thing, then let people work. And also, I would note that sex work in itself is consensual. So there are a number of things that folks might enter sex work that people might think, oh, I wouldn't make that decision myself. But we have to remember that there are a lot of factors out in the world that make people make these choices, and that we have to respect that for people's survival.
So this one I'll just open up to anybody who has, I think I have a minute left, so 45 seconds. Okay, obviously the illegal forcing and coercing of girls and women and gender diverse people into sex work that they themselves did not choose is something that has to be illegal. So we have now, it is under human trafficking. We have criminal code provisions. What would you do about those?
General application, forcing someone to have sex for money or not money is sexual assault, period. We need to enforce that. And then the list goes on, right? In order to commit a trafficking offense, you need to commit a lot of other offenses. And those are sufficient in most cases, and it's actually quite insulting to a lot of victims when sometimes they've gone through extreme violence and the only charge is human trafficking or the only charge is pimping, and not every act of violence. If we start prosecuting those, we'll start seeing the repression that we need against that type of violence.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We're now going to pass it over to 2.5 minutes to Louise. Louise, you've got the floor.
Merci.
Thank you. Miss Wesley, in working for your organization, do you often have to work with women who are asking for your support because they are victims? And I'll use that word because they faced violence in Montreal and Quebec. Quebec doesn't really have an action plan, but does your organization support women? It's an essential part of our work. We want to support women because we know there's violence, and there's no link necessarily between how a person comes to the sex industry and the violence they face, but when a person's in a violent situation, they'll turn to us and we'll support them. And rarely do we communicate with police officers. We try to find other solutions to help them get away from their abuser. And often they will continue in the sex industry, but with different working conditions. We support women who want to do other things, but who have to overcome barriers. The stigmatization follows us everywhere. If we're identified as having had sexual relations for money, we lose our families, our children, and we work on that with people who are trying to get out of that situation. Often the stigmatization is worse than the violence that they faced. Would you say that you've noticed an increase of people who didn't make that choice? Not necessarily, but since the legislation changed in 2014, we see people who are having a more difficult time getting out of that situation. In Quebec, there are hundreds of millions of dollars in fighting sexual exploitation, so some services are no longer available to people because they have to identify themselves as victims, and that's not what they want to do.
I'm going to pass it back over to Leah. Leah, 2.5 minutes.
Thank you so much, Chair. And just building on actually what you just said, Ms. Wesley, and I think it feeds into what I was saying, is that no means no. That's not consent. If there's sexual actions happening without consent, that's assault. when it's happening to a minor, that's child sexual exploitation, and then we have sex work. And child sexual exploitation, and then we have sex work, which is a different, is consensual. So do you think by kind of conflating it, I feel it actually places kids at risk? I think, certainly in Manitoba, where we have the highest number of kids in care, there's kids that are doing sex, but it's not consensual, and it's normalized child sexual exploitation. That's one thing I want you to answer. And then the second thing is I've been pushing for a guaranteed livable basic income. If we want to talk about people making good and bad choices, then we have to give people real choices. I don't think there is choice. However you end up in sex work, whatever the reason, if we want people to choose otherwise, I don't know a lot of choices. Do you think a guaranteed livable basic income would provide people with choices should they choose to not want to stay in the sex work industry? So I'll give that to Madame Sinclair, because you're from my home province here.
Yeah, no worries. Yes. So it's really important to note that I think the kids in care, the whole care system is inherently flawed. And I think that there's a lot of deflecting that happens when we just say like, oh, it's trafficking, it's traffickers. There's a reason folks are ending up in bad situations, right? And so, like you said, if people are being failed by systems and ending up in bad situations, just saying, oh, well, we need to end all sex work, we need to eradicate sex work, that's completely missing the point of the issue. So we're talking about guaranteed basic livable income, that sort of thing. It helps to, again, allow people to make choices that suit them. So that they don't actually have to worry about finding housing. We hear a lot of quotes about people wanting handbags and being lured in by that sort of thing, but people want a place to live, they want to be safe, they want food, they want supporting community, and if we're not allowing them to have that, then we're failing them.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I know. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. On behalf of the committee, I would really like to thank you for coming. Pardon me, I'm sorry? Okay, yeah, we don't have a third round. So I would really like to thank you for coming today. We are going to suspend for just a few minutes because we have a lot of committee business to get through. And I'm going to remind you that we're going to go in camera. So if we have more than one person per one staff per individual and one person from the party only. So I'd ask all others to leave, and we'll suspend for about a maximum of 2 minutes. Thanks. Suspending. Thank you.